Hi class, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing the Concertina prototype book, which is basically your accordion. There's going to be a soft cover first with contents and then a hardcover variation. So this is kind of done in chapters. We'll just kind of get started right away. First off, I wanted to talk again about the paper grain, just so we have a little reiteration of that. Inside your kits that I gave you, you have some origami sheets, bigger ones. I believe I left them bigger, that were rolled up. I kind of rolled it the other way just to make it flatten again. One thing I want to talk with you guys about again is just the idea of the paper grain and where you find the most resistance. So if I take the paper and I'm folding it this way and I'm kind of feeling the resistance at the fold, and then I go ahead and I take it the other way and I'm kind of checking to see which way has more resistance and which way has less. You can even take it more onto the table and kind of push this way and then fold it the other way. And you'll find that this area I feel a little bit more resistance. This area I feel less resistance. That means that the grain is running in this direction with the paper, and that is something always good to keep in mind with any of the books that we're making, that your grain, when you want it to run the lengthwise of your spine, okay, so this would be the way that it's running in order for it to sit lengthwise with my spine. That's going to be the same kind of idea, the grain, when you have your internal part of your accordion that you're going to be folding, you're also going to want the folds to all run the length of the grain, okay? And so this will be important too, just for our covers, to know exactly where the grain is running for when we cut the paper. You can mark your paper, always like have a mechanical pencil with you, but you could just kind of do like a little pencil mark arrow with grain up at the top, just as a reminder for you to know that the grain is running lengthwise this way, okay? So we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is do the internal fold, and I will show you step by step all of the parts of this book. So I have placed two pre-cut book boards, hardcover book boards made out of Davy board in your kit. These ones are smaller. They run 3 inches by 4 1/4. I've cut these exactly to size for these internal sheets that I had also put in your kit. One is neon pink, the other one is neon yellow. These are just for your example sheets. And then you can actually take this model and apply it to any size accordion book you would like to make. So first off, just so you know, the sheets that I have here, they run 4 inches, okay? And that is the height of my book. And this Davy board for my covers runs 4 1/4. That means that there is going to be an 1/8 on either end on the top and bottom there, okay? Then we have the inside part here is 3 inches in width, okay? You can see that. And then we're going to need that to be 1/8 bigger than what our internal contents folded this way inside the book would be for each little section. So the first thing I need you to do is I need you to cut off 2 inches from the strip that I've given you. You can pick the pink or the yellow. It doesn't matter which one you want to use. One is just for a soft cover. The other one is for this hard cover. I'm just going over the entire thing together. So I'm making a little tick mark with my mechanical pencil at the 2 inch mark here, and just another one so that I can use both of those as a guide to measure and cut, okay? And this, just cutting off this 2 inches is going to make the length of this accordion book exactly what we need it for the internal parts of this cover, okay? And you'll see as we go through the whole process. So I'm scoring, and I'm holding my ruler down in my left hand really tight so that it doesn't move on me. There, like that. Okay, so now I've got this 2 inches shorter. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this internal sheet into an accordion. So I want you to take and fold it widthwise long, and you're going to be matching up your two edges as best you can, okay, and hopefully you've cut them straight. Then you pinch in the center here, okay, and again, always using your bone folder, moving from the inside out in either direction, okay, so that's our first fold in the middle. Then you can take this outside sheet and bring it and line it up to that middle fold, okay, right where there's a nice crease. And again, I'm going to pinch in the center and I'm going to fold out in either direction, okay, and that gives me two sections here. I can do the same thing again on the other side. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to take this end of the sheet and I'm going to bring it right up into that folded edge and do the same thing again. Okay, on the other side, we're repeating both sides here. And remember, once you make a fold with the bone folder, that is going to make a nice sharp crease that is pretty much done and in there then, okay? And then we want to take, and I'm going to make two folds here and here. So I'm going to take this crease, I can actually flip it over this way, it'll make it easier, and I'm going to match that right up again to my middle, but instead I'm just flipping this over, pinching that, and going right underneath and making that fold, okay? So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sections on this side. I'm going to repeat and do the same thing on this other edge. Okay, and so now I've got 8 little sections total, and you can go ahead and just reverse them back and forth so that they're always folded in opposite directions. And then what I like to do is I go back in and I just make some nice creases so that they're getting folded either direction. And you might just need to, because these sheets have been they've been folded up for you guys before when I made the kit. They might just need to be laid out for a little bit and kind of unravel before we get to the making of the book. But because you can see a little bit of bend and crease in my actual paper itself. But so there's the start of your accordion, okay? And then the next part of what we're going to do is we're going to cover our book boards for either end so that we can add our hardcover book boards to the internal contents of our accordion. So the next part, I had kind of done this already on my own here, but just to kind of let you know, with the long sheet of origami and the grain running in the longer direction, I have cut out 2 cover sheets to cover my back and front cover of my accordion book. And I have made sure that it is 1 inch longer in either direction. So that means when the board actually sits inside the paper, it's going to be about a 1/2 inch around on either side. And I've also made it so the grain of the paper that I've cut is running long, going with the length of my boards. So everything is running long with the spine, which is going to be on these edges on the sides, okay? So I have 2 of these cut. You can pick whichever kind of cover paper you would like. This origami will work good for your prototypes, but then as you go further along and we do more prototypes, you can pick all kinds of different covers. You can make your own decorative type of paper. You could make book cloth. We'll get into that stuff later on. So the next thing I want to do is you can measure it to make sure it's exact if you want, but you basically want 1/2 inch on either side. And also the top and bottom, I'm staying in making sure that I'm within the window for you to see, but basically kind of eyeing it so it's even a 1/2 inch around. And I'm going to take with my mechanical pencil again, and I'm just going to make an outline around that book board so that I can see it. And you're going to want to do it for both of your covers. So I've got it there, and now I'm going to also do it with this one. Okay. And then we're going to be getting into gluing. I'm going to show you step by step how you set that all up. So that looks about right. And again, I'm eyeing it right now. You could be more precise and measure it with your ruler. It's up to you. You could also, for this part, I still like to use a pencil so I don't see any of that line come through on the other side. But if it's better for you visually to have a pen, you can use a pen for this as well. Okay, so I've got those set up. Now with both of these book boards, I have these there. I'm also going to want to set up my glue. So I'm just taking out a container. I picked this clear glass one so you could see. And all of you guys have, this is PVA glue. I gave you a little bit of this to take home with you. It would probably be best if you ordered a little bit more of this online because you will start to use more of this. I'm just going to put a little bit of this in a container here. Okay, and have this to work with. Don't put out too much, just enough that you will have to use today. And I'm going to add a teeny little bit of water to it just to make it slightly more liquidy, and not too much glue. You don't want it to be too thin. And then the next part here is I have this brush. I just have a cheap brush that I've gotten from Home Depot. I like to cut off most of the fibers so that it's shorter before I use it as a gluing brush. And it just makes it so it's a little easier to use for me. So I'm showing you that part right now. And then I just treat this always as my gluing brush. Okay. And you know, these brushes cost you maybe $1. So I don't feel too bad about ruining this one, but I do want to get all of these fibers out of my area before I start to glue. And it will be very important how clean you keep your area for gluing. So I've got this brush. I'm going to stir in the water here to make sure that my glue is nice and thin. This is pretty good, kind of the consistency of non-fat yogurt, maybe. Okay, this also looks already pretty thin. I'm going to add a little bit more of the regular glue. You don't need to add much water, just a teeny bit, okay? And this is just to make sure that it spreads really evenly for you. So I've got my glue in here. I've got my pages. I've got my book boards. You should also, if you have 2 other little boards available to you, you might have them in your kit. I like to use these as a measuring guide, so I'm keeping them to the side. And then I also like to have just some cheap pieces of copy paper. This is for when I'm gluing so that I don't get any glue on my surface area where I am actually working. So I'm gonna use this first right on top of my copy paper and glue the first page of my cover board. So I'm going to go from the inside out in a fanning, even thickness all around. Okay, I want to cover it and see how I'm always working from the inside out. Okay, and I'm trying not to move my paper around too much so that I don't get glue on the opposite side, right? And once I get it where it's nice and covered all the way to the edges, you want to get it everywhere because of the shrinkage of the paper, then I'm going to go ahead and kind of carefully pull up my finger. See, glue kind of gets everywhere. You want to be careful. And then I can fold this page over, and that way glue is not going to get anywhere else. It's just a way of keeping glue from getting everywhere. And then while the glue is still wet, I'm going to take my little cover board and I'm going to put it right into the outline. Okay, and then I'm just going to go on the other side carefully and just rub that down, make sure there's no air bubbles or anything and it's all laying flat. And then I'm just going to let that dry, even the edges, okay, of my glue. I'm going to put that to the side. And then I'm going to do the next one just exactly the same. Okay, and lift your fingers carefully. And I'm actually can use the opposite side. Make sure you're doing your right size board. And I'm going to place that very carefully in my outlines again. Now my glue is dry on my edges here, and it's also nice and smooth, and my cover paper is glued to my cover boards there. And so the next part I want to do is I want to actually cut these edges of the corners so that I can fold the paper in and over on top of the sides and edges so that it's completely covered on either edge, on all edges actually. Okay, so when I mentioned having two small cover boards, they're nice to use because the actual thickness of two, when you place it at the corner at a 45-degree angle, it gives just the amount of paper that we need on this edge for our cutting. So when we fold, we have a nice coverage of our corners. Okay, so I'm going to take both boards and I'm going to line them up at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to actually just make a line right there. Now, one thing you can do too, if you just want to make it easier on yourself, and you just want to make sure everything is dry when you do this, you can actually just place these boards down together, and then on the other side, just slowly score that cover paper and cut that corner edge, okay, just like that. And then that becomes your kind of perfect edge there. I'm going to do that for all of my corners on both the front and back cover. Okay, so now I've got both of these with all the corners cut, and I actually like to keep these little triangles. You might sometimes end up finding that your paper on the edges doesn't completely cover your corners on one side, and you can use these to glue and fix some little uneven areas. So just keep those little triangles handy. The first thing that we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to fold over our paper on the top and the bottom. You're always going to want to do one side and then its opposite first, and then move on to the next side. and do one side and then the next. So again, I'm going to use copy paper just as a way to keep my space clean. Okay, and I've got it kind of lined all the way up the top here. And you can still use your thick brush, or you can use a little bit of a thinner brush if you need to. You really don't want to get too much glue. You just want it to be evenly distributed on the top and bottom and a little bit inside this area. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and push up with my finger along that edge and then pull over my paper. And you'll get a little bit of extra glue on your hand. I like to just pull some of that off and put it on my copy paper, right? And just like that. Okay, and with these thinner papers, you could use your bone folder to stretch it, but you want to be really careful because you could actually tear your paper pretty easily. With book cloth, it's a little bit easier. And then I just fold this part of my copy paper over, and then I go on to the next side. And that way I'm not wasting too much of my copy paper, but all the glue is kind of staying right in one location. So I'm going to do this. Again, making sure it's nice and even. I had a little tear there, so fix that. And pushing that over. Okay, any extra glue, I just take that up like this. This side's a little bit more delicate because of that tear, so I'm being really careful. Okay, and then before we end up going over, I'm going to fold this over again so no glue's there. But before we fold over these sides, what I want to do is I want to take the tip of my bone folder here and I want to kind of just push in at the corners, that little extra material, and I'm just taking it and pushing it right up against the side there so that it's nice and flush against that side edge. And the tip of your bone folder works really well for this. Just makes a nice little crease. And I do that for all 4 sides, 4 corners. And then I can go back in and start to do either side, the right and left. So now I'm going to put a little bit more glue on this edge. And again, maybe a smaller brush would be better for you at this point. The glue is very fluid. Okay, and now I am going to, again, take my finger, making sure I don't have too much glue on the outside. And I'm pushing that over on that crease first, and making sure that it's sitting nice and even. And that really covers my corners really well, and you can't see any of that board. And once we add the accordion to the inside, you won't see any of this at all. So now I'm going to do my other edge, and then one of the boards is finished. That's actually pretty good. And so now that's covered completely, and we can see it about 1/2 inch on the inside there. So now I'm going to do the same exact thing for my other cover, and then I will show you how to attach the internal contents. So now I've gotten both of these covers, the front and back cover, covered, and I glued all the edges, so they're all ready to go. And so then the next part here is just to take the accordion, and I'm going to want to glue the front page and also the back page. Now, just so you know, and kind of a reminder, and you can use this for any size accordion that you end up doing, whatever the fold is inside the accordion, the height of it, the book covers that you add of hardcover should end up being 1/4 inch taller, so that you have 1/8 of an inch on either side. And then the board should also only be 1/8 inch wider than your internal pages. Okay, so this one here, just so you know, it's just right under 3 inches. It's 1/8 of an inch under. And then this width is right at 3 inches. Okay, and so when I go to glue, I'm going to want to glue that edge of my spine right to the edge of my book pages. And you will end up having 1/8 around your top, your bottom, and your foredge near the opening of your book. Okay, so anytime that you make an accordion any size, you will use that same math. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to end up on my copy sheets. I'm going to add some glue. Oh, by the way, I ended up using a smaller brush to add glue to the other edges, and that ended up working great for having more control over these side edges. You can use a smaller brush for this as well, or you can use your bigger brush. But you kind of want to move pretty fast when you're in the middle of gluing. And again, I like to go from the inside out if I can, and holding down my sheet as best I can so it's not moving and picking up glue from the paper on the sides. And I'm just going to get really nice even coverage as best I can all over this page, only to that folded edge. Okay, but nice and even. This is why I like to use a bigger brush for this part. You usually can move a little bit faster for it. Making sure I have good coverage here, and that I don't want that part to have any glue. Make sure that that's all kind of even. Okay, and again, I can fold this over so no glue gets onto my book. And then I'm going to take one of the covers and I'm going to line this up as best I can right to that edge, and making sure you can even fold that down so that you can see that it's lined up to that edge and even on either side. Okay. And you just want to make sure that it's sitting pretty much right towards the end of the spine there. And then I can take my bone folder and just really smooth down that end sheet. That's what it would be called. That's attached to my cover. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the back piece. I'm going to fold this over and I'm going to add glue now to this back side of this edge, making sure that you've got everything folded the correct way so that you're actually, this side up is where you're going to glue. Okay. And then I'm going to take my bigger brush this time so you can just see how much faster this works. So I'm going in a fanning there. So maybe nice to have two size brushes, one smaller, one a little bit bigger. And again, just make sure that glue's just right inside that fold, not on the outside. And nice even distribution. And then again, I'm going to fold this back so no glue gets anywhere. Now, one thing I'd like to do with this side is just to make sure that my book lines up evenly. I've got this as my spine edge to the right. I'm going to fold this up, and I'm actually going to take and maneuver my other cover so it lines up pretty much with my bottom cover, right? And so that they're sitting really flush. Then I can open this up and smooth it out again with the bone folder. But now I know my front and back covers are pretty much lined up when it's folded. like this. And then this is the spine edge here. Okay, so now we have an accordion with a front and back hardcover. It sits like this, or folds in on itself and can sit like this and open up. Okay, so you can have it be more sculptural, or you can have it be flatter and more of a traditional book, the way it opens. And this could actually be used as the beginning of many structures put together in a hybrid type of book structure. One thing that I would do too is when you start to see at first, especially with this paper, there's some kind of curve to the body. You could take, after it's been glued and the glue is dry, you can put some wax paper in the inside where the glue's been in the front and also the back, and then put it under some weight, like maybe some books or some bricks, and leave it overnight for 24 hours, and it will get nice and flat for you, and it won't just billow up like that at the start, because of this paper being kind of folded into a big circle for you. It ended up creating a little bit more body than it should have. Okay, so that's one way to make sure that it lays flat. So I just wanted to show you really quickly another one that I had ended up creating earlier on, one of the accordion books. I did this with a group of kids out in Highland Spring Ranch, and we actually ended up making our own watercolor paper in the front with, we soaked watercolor onto sheets of BFK or printmaking paper, and then while the watercolor was still wet, we laid all of these plants that we collected, and then we let it dry completely, and the watercolor has to dry for over 24 hours completely. And then when you pull up all the plant material, it ends up making all of these really nice prints, impressions into the paper. So I use this as coverboard, and then we ended up doing cyanotypes. On the inside, we had created cyanotypes with all of these plants that we ended up finding out in the farm. And then we ended up using those and putting those pieces together. We actually glued them here and here, but you can do a more precise glue on the inside edge. And you can make your accordions very long. I'm going to talk to you guys in a little bit about another way to add more length to your accordion. I'll do that on a separate demo. But I just wanted you to see what can be done and how you can interpret with different materials you find or create. And so this is just kind of a basic book that can open up and show all of these lovely different prints of local plants.